There comes a moment in every shinobi's life when the world shifts in a way the body can feel, but the mind cannot explain. One day, the path ahead of you is clear, familiar, predictable, and then suddenly, without warning, the world changes direction, and you cannot follow the way you once did. For Arashi, that moment arrived on an ordinary morning, not during a battle, not during a loss, not during a tragedy, but in the quiet space between breaths. He woke before dawn as he always did. He tied his mask, tightened his wrappings, prepared for training. But as he stepped onto the stone courtyard, something felt wrong. Not the world, but himself. His body moved on instinct, yet the movements felt borrowed, as if he were repeating someone else's discipline. The forms he once practiced with devotion now felt heavy. The routine that once brought clarity now echoed with emptiness. His mind whispered a question he had never dared to ask. Who am I becoming, and why does the old path feel too small? He pushed the thought away and continued his drills, but the discomfort grew. His breath was steady, yet something beneath the breath trembled. He felt like a warrior wearing armor that no longer belonged to him. Strong, but misaligned. Focused, but directionless. Moving, but not arriving anywhere. Most shinobi never speak of this feeling. They bury it under training. They smother it with discipline. They drown it in silence. Because admitting that your path no longer fits you feels like admitting weakness, or worse, betrayal to the warrior you used to be. But denying it does not make it disappear. For weeks, Arashi moved through his days like a ghost inside his own body. His techniques remained sharp, his discipline intact, yet something deep inside him felt fractured. He avoided the feeling by pushing harder, longer training sessions, sharper strikes, colder meditation. But the more he forced himself, the more distant he felt from his own spirit. Until one night, he dreamed of standing on a battlefield where every warrior looked identical to him. Same stance, same mask, same movements. When he struck, they struck. When he breathed, they breathed. And when he moved forward, they all moved forward at once. There was no individuality, no center, no self. In the dream, Arashi whispered, "Which one is me?" None of the figures answered, because none of them were him anymore. He woke with a start, breath shaking in the darkness. And in that fragile hour between night and dawn, he finally admitted the truth he had been avoiding. The world around him had changed. His spirit had changed. But his identity had remained stuck in a version of himself that no longer existed. The next morning, he sought out Master Renji, a quiet sage known not for strength or rank, but for his unshakable stillness. Renji listened without interrupting as Arashi described the inner conflict that had been building inside him. The silence that followed felt heavy, as if the master was weighing every word, every hesitation, every fracture in Arashi's voice. Finally, Renji spoke. "Most warriors fear losing battles," he said, "but the true fear is losing the self who once fought them." Arashi felt the truth strike him like cold wind. Renji continued, "The world around you changes faster than your identity does. The path you built your life upon was created by the man you used to be, not the man standing here now." Arashi lowered his gaze. "Then what is happening to me?" "Your old path is dying," Renji said, "and your new one has not yet spoken." The master motioned him to follow, leading him up a hidden mountain trail. They climbed until the forest thinned, and the wind carried the faint scent of winter. At the summit, Renji knelt beside a lone pine tree clinging to the edge of the cliff. Half of its trunk was twisted, broken, bent by storms that had reshaped it. Yet it still stood, strong, balanced, alive. Renji touched the damaged bark. This tree has been struck by lightning, crushed by snow, torn by wind. But it lives because it did not cling to what it once was. It allowed the world to change it. Arashi stared at the wounded tree, seeing himself in its scars. "You," Renji said, "are trying to live as a warrior you used to be. But the world no longer moves at the same rhythm, and neither do you." Arashi swallowed. "Then who am I now?" Renji smiled gently, the kind of smile that held both truth and challenge. "That is what you must discover. Not through force, not through imitation, but through returning to the part of you that the world cannot break." As they descended the mountain, Arashi felt something he hadn't felt in months. A quiet shift, subtle but real. Not clarity, not direction, but awareness. The first step toward rebuilding. He realized the problem was not that he had lost his way. The problem was that he had outgrown it. When he reached the courtyard again, the forms he had practiced all his life no longer felt like chains. They felt like memories, valuable, but not enough to guide his future. Arashi understood something then. He was beginning a new path, one not built from tradition, expectation, or past identity, but from the warrior he was becoming. And this beginning, though fragile, was real. If this first step of Arashi's journey speaks to you, take a moment to like the video. It helps this story reach more people who need it. Arashi believed that once he stepped away from the life he had outgrown, clarity would arrive quickly. But clarity is never waiting at the beginning of a new path. Instead, he walked into a silence so vast it forced him to feel everything he had avoided for years. The mountain shrine was quiet, almost unsettlingly so. The wind carried no familiar sounds of clashing weapons or shouted orders. There was only the soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of a crow, and the rhythmic sweep of the old monk's broom across the wooden steps. Arashi wasn't used to a world that did not demand anything from him. In the stillness, his own thoughts grew louder. He spent the first night awake, listening to the unfamiliar quiet. His muscles twitched from habits that no longer served a purpose. His mind replayed memories of the compound, training drills, missions, comrades, as if clinging to the identity he had shared. Even in the absence of armor, he could still feel the weight of it pressing against his chest. In the morning, the monk led him to a narrow bridge that hung over a long, deep ravine. The wooden planks creaked beneath their feet. From the center of the bridge, the valley stretched endlessly in both directions. The monk pointed toward the horizon. You see the mountains there? They look still, but they are always moving. Very slowly, too slowly for the eye to catch, yet the earth beneath them never stopped shifting. Arashi looked, unsure of the lesson. A warrior's identity is the same, the monk continued. You think you remain who you were, but you have been moving all along. The pain comes only when you try to hold yourself still while your spirit evolves. The word struck a place inside Arashi he had never examined. He had always believed his discipline came from holding fast, from consistency, from unchanging routines, from following the path carved before him. But the monk was suggesting something far deeper, that discipline was not stillness. It was adaptation, the ability to remain yourself while everything around you transforms. For the next days, the monk gave Arashi tasks that felt strangely unrelated to warrior training. He asked him to fetch water from a river several miles away, not because the shrine needed water, but because the journey would test his restlessness. The path forced him through tight clusters of trees, across uneven stones, through cold streams that numbed his legs. Every step carried silence, and every moment of silence revealed a new discomfort. On the second day, as Arashi filled the bucket at the riverside, he caught himself thinking, "This is meaningless. I should be training." But the thought dissolved when he noticed his reflection trembling on the water's surface. He didn't recognize the expression looking back at him, a mixture of uncertainty and exhaustion, but also something unfamiliar, something like vulnerability. By the time he returned to the shrine, the monk was waiting. "What did you learn?" the monk asked. That the path was long, Arashi replied, frustrated. The monk tapped the bucket with his cane. "And what of the weight?" Arashi frowned. "It grew heavier the farther I walked." The monk nodded, not because the water changed, but because he resisted the journey. Arashi's shoulders tensed. "I was not resisting." "Every thought you had," the monk said, "every moment you wish you were somewhere else, every breath filled with irritation instead of presence, all of these made the bucket heavier." Arashi didn't respond. He realized the monk was not teaching him how to carry water. He was teaching him how to face himself. That evening, the monk asked him to meditate on the wooden platform again. Arashi sat reluctantly, bracing for the inner storm he now knew would come. The thoughts arrived as expected. Doubts, frustrations, memories, fears, each one trying to pull him back into the identity he had abandoned. But this time, something different happened. Instead of battling each thought, he allowed them to float past. Instead of resisting the discomfort, he rested inside it. The sensations didn't disappear, but they lost their sharpness. The noise in his mind felt less like chaos and more like weather passing through a landscape. After what felt like hours, the monk approached quietly. "You are beginning to separate who you are from who you were," he said. Arashi kept his eyes closed. "I'm not sure I understand." "Of course you do," the monk replied. "You have spent your life believing your identity is built from motion, from skill, from reputation, from the strength of your body. But identity is built in stillness. When all those things fall away, the self that remains is the one you must rebuild from." Arashi opened his eyes slowly. The world seemed slightly different, not brighter, not clearer, but softer, as if the edges of things no longer cut into him the way they used to. Days passed this way. The monk never told Arashi what he was becoming. He simply placed him in situations where the truth revealed itself. Some days Arashi felt strong. Other days he felt lost. But every day, a new layer of the old self fell away, sometimes gently, sometimes painfully. One afternoon, the monk handed him a single wooden staff. "You will train," he said. Arashi's heart lifted. Finally, something familiar, something that felt like home. But when he took his stance, the monk shook his head. No forms, no drills, just movement. Arashi hesitated. "Unstructured movement serves no purpose." "It serves the purpose you have forgotten," the monk replied. And so Arashi moved, slowly at first, then with more speed, then with pauses that came naturally rather than strategically. He felt his body adjusting in ways he had never noticed during traditional training. Not bound by form, not repeating patterns from the past, just responding to the moment. For the first time in months, he felt alive. When he stopped, breath heavy, the monk said simply, "You see? Even your body knows how to evolve. It is your mind that is slow to follow." That night, Arashi sat alone at the edge of the shrine, watching clouds crawl across the moon. He felt something shift inside him, a subtle alignment, a quiet acceptance. He still didn't know who he was becoming, but he no longer feared the not knowing. In the space between the old identity and the new one, something like strength was beginning to grow. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He was not lost. He was in transition. And transition is simply the space where a warrior is remade. Arashi woke before sunrise on the 7th day at the shrine, but something was different. The air was colder, sharper, almost expectant. The world felt as if it were holding its breath. He stepped outside and found the monk standing at the edge of the clearing, gazing toward the distant mountains as pale morning light bled through the clouds. Without turning, the monk said, "Today, you stop searching for who you were and begin becoming who you must be." Arashi approached quietly. "I don't know what that means yet." "You will," the monk replied. "But first, there's a lesson your mind won't like." He led Arashi down a narrow path behind the shrine, one the warrior had never noticed before. The trail twisted between thick trees and ended at a small stone garden, empty except for a single wooden box placed in the center. The monk gestured for Arashi to kneel beside it. "Open it." Inside was nothing but a worn, cracked mirror. Arashi lifted it carefully. The surface was uneven, distorted by age. His reflection wavered, fragmented into thin lines of light. He barely recognized the man staring back, not because the face was unfamiliar, but because it looked unguarded, honest in a way he had spent years avoiding. "I don't understand," Arashi whispered. The monk sat beside him. Every warrior believes his greatest enemy lives outside himself. But the warrior who never examines his own reflection is the one who falls first. You have trained your body, sharpened your instincts, strengthened your will, but you have not yet confronted the version of yourself that is holding you back. Arashi stared deeper into the distorted mirror. "What am I supposed to see?" "Not what you are," the monk said softly. "What you refuse to face." Arashi saw flashes, moment he thought he had let go of, the pressure he placed on himself to never falter, the fear of disappointing those who trained him, the guilt of outgrowing the path that once defined him, the constant, suffocating expectation to become someone worthy of respect. He felt a tightening in his chest. "I'm not sure I'm ready." "No one is ever ready," the monk said, "but the world does not wait for your readiness. It waits for your honesty." Arashi looked again. This time he allowed the mirror to distort him, to show him the cracks, the doubts, the worn edges he tried to hide. And for the first time, instead of resisting what he saw, he accepted it. The monk placed a hand on Arashi's shoulder. Good. The mirror reveals who you have been. Now it is time to choose who you will become. He took the mirror gently and placed it back into the box. Come, he said. Your training now begins. The monk guided him to a wide stretch of open ground. The sky was fully awake now, clouds rolling slowly, casting moving shadows across the earth. A brisk wind tugged at Arashi's robe. The monk handed him a wooden staff, but there was no stance to assume, no form to follow, no instructions. What am I to do? Arashi asked. Act, the monk said, without permission, without tradition, without waiting for someone else to define your movement. Arashi hesitated. All his life, training had been structure, technique, pattern, precision measured by his teacher's eyes. But now he was being asked to move from a place without shape, without rules. He closed his eyes and exhaled, and then he stepped forward. His body moved slowly at first, then more fluidly. The staff circled through the air in arcs that were neither offensive nor defensive. They were expressions, the kind of movements that came not from memory, but from the spirit. He pivoted, struck, swept, stepped back, turned again. Not in any form he had learned, but in a rhythm he didn't know he possessed. He felt the wind guide him. He felt the air stabilize him. He felt his breath become the silent command behind every motion. When he finally stopped, his heartbeat was steady. His hands did not tremble. His mind did not scatter. For the first time, he wasn't performing. He wasn't proving. He wasn't preserving some old identity. He was simply himself. The monk nodded. This is the beginning of mastery. Not when a warrior repeats what he has been taught, but when he creates movement from the truth inside him. Arashi looked at his own hands, surprised at how natural the moment felt. There was no resistance left in his breath, no tension left in his shoulders. The fragments inside him had begun to align. Have I rebuilt myself? He asked quietly. The monk shook his head. You have begun rebuilding. Becoming is not an event. It is a practice, a returning. The world will pull you away from yourself again and again. Each time, you must return here. Arashi bowed deeply, not from duty, not from habit, but from gratitude. And then the monk handed him his old mask. It looked different now, not heavier, not lighter, just neutral. Not an identity, not a burden. A tool, nothing more. You may wear this when you choose, the monk said, not because it defines you, but because you now define it. Arashi held the mask for a long moment. He felt no attachment to the warrior he once was, no shame in who he had been, no fear of who he was still becoming. He placed the mask gently against his chest, and for the first time, he felt it rest on a foundation stronger than pride, stronger than tradition, stronger even than discipline, self-understanding. As they walked back to the shrine, the monk spoke the final truth of Arashi's training. When the world changes, most men cling to the pieces of themselves that feel familiar. But a warrior who returns to his center each time life shifts, that warrior becomes unbreakable. Arashi looked at the horizon. It no longer felt like a threat. It felt like an invitation. The man who arrived at the shrine had been confused, misaligned, carrying an identity that no longer fit. The man leaving it would not chase his past. He would not collapse under uncertainty. He would not fear becoming someone new. He would rebuild again and again from the strength inside him. If this journey spoke to you, tell me in the comments which part of Arashi's transformation hit you the hardest.